So this is all very enlightening stuff. I have so many questions. I'm not even sure which direction to take it in. I guess I want to know a little bit more about the formation of Palestinian identity, because as you mentioned, many people say there was no Palestine, but in fact, both Zionism and Palestinian nationalism were a result of the same global trend of nationalist movements. And it very well may be the case that Palestinian identity solidified as a response to Zionism, but it's not that there wasn't a greater macro considerations and a movement of nationalism happening which inspired this Palestinian nationalism. I guess what I'm wondering is, I know that there was a lot of, in the earlier days, there was a lot of talk of not Palestine being an independent state, but it being part of Greater Syria, right? So there would be Greater Syria, and then there would be the Palestinian province of Greater Syria. Was there a tension at all between Arabs that wanted Greater Syria and then maybe Palestinian Arabs that said, no, we don't want Greater Syria, but we want Palestine as an independent state? Did that tension exist? And if not, when did that separation happen, where they kind of moved away from the notion of Greater Syria towards an independent Palestinian state?
So Adar, that's a fantastic question. It's something I'm grappling with actually right now, because my work stops in 1914. It doesn't really go up to the Greater Syria. What I can tell you is that, once again, people use Greater Syria, whether it's the pro-Israel camps that want to deny Palestinian existence, and they say, hey, they were Syrians, right? Or whether you have some very ultra-Arab nationalists that say the Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria were all the result of the Sykes-Picot and the divisions of the Ottoman Empire, right, into nation states. So there's a little truth, I think, in both, in that you have, in 1917, the worst possible scenario for Arabs, and that is they become part. They fall to British colonialism, right? For some reason, both Palestinians close to Egypt, not for some reason, and Iraq, what would become Iraq, they are obsessed with the fear that they might one day fall to the British. And both of them provide routes to the Mediterranean, from India to the Mediterranean. So think about that. This is why they're so important. That's why Iraq and Palestine. So in late Ottoman Palestine, they're already talking about that corridor. They're already talking about, certainly there's going to Palestinians, and one of their petitions say, we're worried that, they're going to create a corridor from India all the way to the Mediterranean through Palestine, a train. Very interesting. They do not see Jews as Europeans per se during this period. They always talk about the fear of Europeans and the growing Jewish presence or Jewish hegemony, right? They don't see Jews were never, the Palestinians always understood the religious connection Jews have to Palestine, and that it's an integral part of their sort of worldview, right? In the previous political era. So that's one thing. Now I'm doing the professor thing where I forgot the original question. Oh, Palestinian identity, yeah, with Syria. So during the late Ottoman era, you do have the emergence of a sort of Lebanese identity, Palestinian identity, Syrian identity. That same Palestinian that might call himself Shaba Palestini, when they go to New York, they might call themselves Syrians. And we know that when they went to South America, they were called Turcos, which remain today, right? Jews in Mexico or in South America are often called Turcos because they came from the Ottoman Empire. They are not Turks, right? So that way of defining yourself is pretty tricky. Who are you speaking to? Who are you defining yourself vis-a-vis or what? So after World War I, we said the worst possible scenario, this is where I was at, I got back to it, is falling to British colonization. And worse, you have Sharif Hussein cuts a deal with the British in the Arab Revolt that his son gets Faisal, goes to Syria and establishes the Syrian kingdom. Now the Palestinians are at a point here. Do we go on our own, or do we join other Syrians in our struggle? And it only makes sense that you would go with the larger group. All of them knew that the intentions of France and Britain were insincere and that they proved to be dangerous to them, that they were only made to divide the local populations. The Americans, Woodrow Wilson sends the Crane Commission to say he's suspicious of the British and French. Woodrow Wilson. So the Palestinians and Syrians and Lebanese won't be suspicious. Now, two groups are bound to get quite a bit out of it. First of all, Faisal, for example, the community is anti-Zionist, anti-Balfour Declaration 100%. Faisal, before he's thrown out in 1920, makes a deal with Chaim Weizmann, the Faisal Weizmann. And Jews were willing to accept some kind of autonomous homeland in Palestine within that kingdom of Faisal's kingdom, of the Greater Arab Kingdom, the Syrian Arab Kingdom. Okay? So now the Syrians are joining that kingdom. Palestinians are joining, representing southern Syria. But let me tell you, before 1918, I do not see the word southern Syria ever. I've never seen it one time in my life where they define Palestine as Suril al-Junubiya, the southern Syria. It doesn't exist. And that's been put in our mind like first aliyah, second aliyah. That's been stamped into our mind, etched into our memory. And we say, oh, they always saw themselves as southern Syria. No, they might have called themselves Syrians, but that was Palestine. That wasn't, maybe it's included in this Sham, whatever Sham means, which is Syria. So we have a lot of finagling history to suit our own needs. So
Right.
yeah, Palestinians were obviously making sense that we'd be better with Syria. The Jewish community, of course, is going to be wiped out and a new community is going to come. And that's David Ben Gurion, who was virtually unknown in the late Ottoman era. I mean, people know who he is. He's in Istanbul. All the labor Zionists are in Istanbul studying in parliament, right? Hoping one day go to parliament, and in an Ottoman system. So if you think that the labor Zionists are just going to Istanbul to study for fun, well, that's surprise. The Ottomans lose. Moshe Sheret leaves Istanbul. He picks up his grades in Istanbul and then goes on to London to study. Okay, so yes, that Greater Syria is something, but we can't put too much on it, because when King Crane Commission goes to Jerusalem, the Palestinians are saying we want some type of autonomy here in Jerusalem, at least for our community. I mean, they see now when they do a polling of everyone, it's a very small percent that wants some kind of autonomy for southern Syria, Palestine, but it's there. Meaning leaders know that they have something to lose. Remember, everyone's working within the Ottoman system, where the metropole is Istanbul. So Damascus and Jerusalem aren't competing with each other. In a Syrian state, they would be competing with each other.
Right.
100%. So the idea that the Palestinians have something to lose, for sure. The idea that after 1920, the French come and say, you know what, the Faisal? Sorry. This was promised us by the British. He then is given Iraq, becomes king of Iraq. His brother is given the king of Transjordan. Okay, Abdullah. And Now it's British and French imperialism mandates over Syria and Palestine. So up until the 20s, some Palestinians are still saying, let's unite with Syria. But by 1930, this is ending, right? This is not going to happen. And that's where they come back to the Palestinian identity. So if we have, in my class, I draw a line here. I put Palestine identity here, Arab identity here. And later on, you could add maybe Islamist identity or where Hamas would fit in. So over time, sometimes it goes close to the Arab, sometimes it goes closer to Palestinian, sometimes it goes to 1960s. The failure of the Arab countries to produce anything leads Palestinians to say, once again, we really should rely on ourselves. They failed us in 48, they failed us in 67. They failed us in World War I also, you could argue. Okay? So identity is something that is always transforming. And in Israel, we see 75, 76 years of a state. We see a big, heavy education system. But yet some people in Israel define themselves first as Jews and then as Israelis. And some Israelis say, no, I'm first Israeli, then I'm Jewish. You understand? And
Right.
this changes over time. No one's saying, oh, there's no such thing as Israeli identity, Look at 20% defined. I imagine 30 or 40% of Israel might define them first as Jews, right? As, what are you? So then they say, but Hasidics are anti-Zionists, or that, Hasidics, whether they're anti-Zionism or Zionism, and this is going to be a huge headline that we didn't mention, and I have to mention this. Anti-Zionism in the late Ottoman era is not whether Jews should come to Palestine or they shouldn't come to Palestine. The anti-Zionists within the Ottoman political world, Jews, still believe, for most except one or two people, still believe in Jewish migration to Palestine. Because if you're in Palestine, if you're a Jew in Jerusalem, you're not going to say, I'm against immigration of Jews. Why? Because your community has to grow. They have to thrive. You want Jews to come, to join your community, for the strengthen your community. It's the simple things. You have migration to South America. Jews are also leaving. So Jews, like other Muslims and Christians, are saying, wait a minute, our people are leaving. Who's going to be with us? Okay? So all these terms change at World War I. But yeah, the identities. And by the way, I was going to mention the Maronites had a reason to go against Syria, very much like the Jewish community, right? They have their own interest here. Their own interest is to create a Lebanese Christian state at all costs, and to break away from Syria, right? In this, or not to be part of that Syrian. Okay, you have a large group of Arab Christians in Lebanon to this day that say we should have been part of Syria. This was a Maronite plot to da-da-da-da-da. Okay, today no one's going to argue that they're all Lebanese. No one's going to argue they're all Syrians.